I am delighted to welcome our next guest to the podium as folks get settled. I'm here to introduce Shelley Metzenbaum. Shelley is the president of the Volcker Alliance, a nonprofit organization launched in 2013 to promote the effective execution of public policy and rebuild public trust in government. Shelley's a proven expert on improving efficiency in government, and previously served as the Director of Performance and Personnel Management at the White House Office of Management and Budget. We're going to do something a little differently in this next discussion. Shelley is going to do a keynote presentation and then actually join our Efficient City panel for the Q&A and discussion. So hold your questions, make note, and hold your questions for Shelley until the panel presentation. Please join me in welcoming Shelley to the stage.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm delighted to be here. And basically, for me, it's just great to be able to come here to this event about fiscal leadership and the modern city, convened by Boston University's Initiative on the Cities, which was launched so lovingly by Mayor Tom Menino. Let me begin my remarks by introducing you to the Volcker Alliance because we are a new organization. The Alliance was launched not too long ago by former Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker, who serves as our board chair. We think that Edison captured our motivation beautifully when he said, "Vision without execution is hallucination." Vision, it's a wondrous thing. It awakens our hopes and dreams. It gets us thinking beyond what is to what's possible, to thinking about what should be, not only what we live with. But as Edison warned us, vision alone is not enough. To improve people's lives, it is essential to execute well on that vision. And that's the focus of the Volcker Alliance. To improve people's lives, we really need to think about the delivery capacity of government. That's what we are interested in. So after 30 years of exceptional public service, Paul Volcker decided that it was time to increase attention, increase action to the effective execution of public policy, to get the universities and the best minds in the private sector, and especially the best minds in government, not just debating policy, not just debating politics, but actually thinking about how can we deliver better. Our aim's not to be another think tank, but in fact to be an action engine, a spark plug for change. So I won't go into great detail on how we're going to do that, but I'm happy to talk to any of you about that a little bit more. Last week, we released a major report on structural reform of the U.S. financial regulatory system. We have other projects underway on truth in state budgeting and in the area of performance and building continuous learning and improvement communities. 3 areas of great interest to us are fiscal integrity, performance improvement, and public service education, which is why when Boston University invited me to join you here today, I was so excited about this event. So you ask, this is about fiscal leadership, so let me ask and give you my thoughts on what it takes to be a great fiscal leader. Let me argue that fiscal leaders are obsessed with 4 things: people, purpose, dollars, and risks, and that those same fiscal leaders understand how to use a few very simple, so simple you don't even think about it a lot of times, a few very simple but unbelievably powerful tools to lead, to manage, and to communicate. What are those tools? Goals, measurement, analysis, measured trials to discover new ways to do better, data-informed decision-making, and thoughtful, extensive communication. Unfortunately, these relatively inexpensive tools are often overlooked, and when they are not overlooked, they are often underutilized. Happily, that's beginning to change, and city leaders are at the vanguard of that change. I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, let me explain what I mean when I urge hyper-attention to people, purpose, dollars, and risk. So let's start with people. Basically, and one of the biggest challenges we have in government is keeping the people who work in government connected to the people who live in the cities. That basically keeping that connection of making sure those who work in government don't lose touch with the people in cities, the people who reside in the communities that that government is governing. Why is that so hard? Well, the truth is bureaucracies make that hard, and governments are bureaucracies, but it's true in the private sector too. Every time I deal with my cable company, or when I look at basically how the automobile companies dealt with their customers before the Great Recession, you realize how easy it is for large organizations to lose touch with the people they're trying to serve. And that part of that is because they need rules and they need standard operating procedures so that they can actually function efficiently, so they can function predictably, so they can function fairly. And when you create those rules and standard operating procedures, it creates rigidities. And we got to figure out how to remain agile even while we use some of these rules and these standard operating procedures so we can operate efficiently. That's where these tools of goals and measurement and analysis become so powerful. But the key is staying connected. People in government really need to work hard to do that. And the electoral process helps that, especially with mayors that have, like the late, great Tom Menino, who got out to the neighborhoods every single day. But the strongest fiscal leaders, including Menino, also tapped the power of goals, measurement, and analysis, as Meredith will talk about perhaps later, to align the work of government with the needs of the community. And they also use those goals, that measurement, that analysis, and sometimes these measured trials to inform and engage the community in priority setting, but also in solving the problems, in working on the solutions themselves. So that's the people, staying connected to the people, but it's also important to think about purpose and to be very clear about what it is government is trying to accomplish, why it's trying to accomplish those among all the things a government can try and do, how it's trying to accomplish that, and why it's chosen the means to accomplish that. Government agencies often manage doing what they've always done rather than stepping back periodically and saying, what is it we are trying to accomplish and what's the best way to get there? And if you lose touch with the purpose, and if you stop asking questions all the time, are we accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish? Then you end up running on autopilot, and that's when unexpected inefficiencies start to creep in. You need a more agile way of operating, one that invites ingenuity and innovation to accomplish more mission for the money. And to do that, it's important to stay focused on purpose. Clarity of government purpose, it's the best means for extending that invitation for ingenuity and innovation. And so that is one of the key things really high-performing fiscal leaders work on. Now, of course, one of the questions when the fiscal leaders are doing this, fiscal leadership is focusing on the people, focusing on the purpose, asking, are we accomplishing what we want to accomplish? And then, is there a lower cost way to do what we're doing? How can we innovate? What are others doing? Should we do some experiments to see if we can, try something new that will actually get us some breakthrough gains? That's where the dollars come in. So people, purpose, dollars. And the dollars, these are incredibly tough fiscal times. I don't need to tell anyone in the room this. You've all been listening to it for the last day and a half. These are incredibly tough fiscal times. We've been through an incredibly rough fiscal patch. We're coming out of it, but the fact is that local governments, with their dependency on property tax, have been lagging that recovery. And it was only in 2014 that property taxes are actually starting to increase, according to the National League of Cities. Slow revenues, as many of you have discussed, are exacerbated by the fact that a lot of those revenues are already tied up. The mayor of Syracuse has been talking about that a lot, Stephanie Miner. She estimates that 80% of her revenues are already committed to past obligations. That leaves her very little money Not unlike Detroit, that leaves her very little money to deal with all the water main breaks that she had record high water main breaks this past winter. We've got to deal with these fiscal crises. It's not helped very much by the fact that cities can borrow to do this, and in fact, cities are borrowing at an unprecedented level, almost as high, it's almost to the levels and may even beat the levels from when you had the subsidized Buy America bonds of the Stimulus Act. But the fact is, according to Bloomberg, 70% of those borrowings, 70% of those borrowings are to refinance existing bonds, not for new activities, not for new needs. Now, that may save money because the old bonds were high cost, but still, it doesn't leave a lot in the market, a lot of money to do what needs to happen, both to deal with changing populations and to take advantage of new technologies. So fiscal leadership requires careful attention to the dollar, collecting and analyzing data about one's own experience as well as the experience of others, the benchmarking, to find smarter ways to accomplish for the mission for the money. Fiscal leadership also means, I should point out, resisting the temptation to put current costs on future generations, which we do with fiscal gimmickry all the time in government. It's got to stop. Finally, I think that fiscal leaders need to focus on operational risk, on risks. Risks both of basically financial mismanagement, but other kinds of risks, like the risk of a police officer not making the right choices. We are seeing those risks erupt all over the nation, and especially most recently in Baltimore. How do you manage risks? We need to have our fiscal leadership means focusing on the risks, understanding them, and trying to figure out how to prevent them and respond to them quickly and effectively. So is this kind of fiscal leadership really possible? Let me argue to you that it is, and it's exciting to see what's happening. Let me start. You saw Tony Williams, I think, former mayor of DC, joined you yesterday. Tony Williams walked into the District of Columbia before he was even elected mayor, and he found boxes of undeposited checks sitting on the floor of the basement. There wasn't even the most basic of financial counting systems. And he was able to, while he was the appointed city administrator, put in the basics of government, a decent accounting system. They got the checks deposited on time so you could spend the money. But then after he got elected mayor, he created the DC scorecards, which I think were the first online scorecards. There were two parts of that were particularly of note that I want to share with you. One was he identified the deputy mayor responsible for each area, so that it was creating an accountability that told people in the city who was responsible for what, connecting to the people in government, which organization, which person. The second thing he did was he used the online capacity to give him feedback. So he wasn't just sending out information, he was bringing information back in. He was learning because he knew that the residents of the city, if they read about potholes, would basically tell him, that doesn't ring true for me, if they thought the data wasn't right. So it was a way of getting better data because he knew how weak the city's control systems as he tried to build this capacity. And now today, what's fun for me is if you look at what's happening in DC, he built this solid foundation and it's getting better and better. So if you go onto the DC government's website, you'll see Pothole Palooza, where you can actually see maps that tell you the status of potholes, and people can use social media metrics. They can tweet in a pothole and figure out which ones have been addressed, which ones haven't. They also have grades where they're actually letting citizens grade different departments on a quarterly or monthly basis. Is it perfect? No. Is it getting better? You better believe it. Let's talk about Boston. We all know, or those of us who are from this area, and many of you who follow cities, how great Tom Menino was at getting out of the neighborhoods. We also know how great he was at hiring superbly talented people who cared about the people of the city of Boston and who knew how to execute on the mayor's vision, who knew how to serve the people. And that's why he kept getting elected and reelected over and over again. But you probably don't know about the fact that he built a fiscal and performance infrastructure that is so robust, it's exciting to see that Mayor Walsh has kept it going, called Boston About Results. I urge you to go look at it. You can find the different priorities of the city. And if you look, for example, in the education area where they're trying to get high graduation rates and make sure people are both college ready and career ready, there are 8 different primary indicator areas. And under those 8 indicators, there's sub-indicators. So you look at the graduation rates and how people are doing in the 8th grade and how they're doing in the 1st grade. And you see how the city is trending on those. In addition, you can look at the checkbook that tells you where the spending is happening and who's getting the money. These are all real strengths that are starting to create a foundation of fiscal and performance leadership. And it's not perfect. It's got a long way to go. We have to figure out how to really connect. Do I think many citizens, many residents of the city of Boston or DC are actually looking at these websites? Probably not. But I think we're learning, and it's getting the people who run the departments, the people who work in the departments, and Meredith can talk about this more, but to really start to say, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing it well? And how do I engage help? Let me mention this one other challenge, though, and that is the risk issue that I mentioned. So both Baltimore and New York City have established a very strong performance and fiscal measurement and public reporting capability. And it's gotten better and better. I won't go into the details on that. Happy to talk to all of you about that in the future. But one of the issues that I think is quite clear, and many of you may know about the work of Bill Bratton as the head of the New York City Police Department, now for the 2nd time, was in Los Angeles, brought the crime rate down a lot. But was there enough attention, including in the period when he wasn't the New York City Police Commissioner, to the unwanted incidents, to the risks, to the complaints about police abuse? And now the city is starting to take a look at that and manage that because they had some very serious, tragic situations with the death of Eric Garner and now in Baltimore. Because were we managing not only the performance objectives, the mission objectives, but also managing the unwanted risks that we wanted to prevent? So if you look on the City of New York's website, you will see that they have started to, and I don't know if they've been doing this for a while, I think they probably lost attention, but they're now getting more attentive to the risks and paying attention to the complaints they're getting in about police conduct. And they're comparing not only for the last 3 years, but they're showing you where their trends are from the most recent quarter this year to the similar quarter last year. It's looking good, but it's clear that they're starting to put some real management attention. So that gets me back to saying, where are we? What do we need to do? And what's fiscal leadership about? I think fiscal leadership's about fiscal and performance leadership. It's about obsession with people, purpose, dollars, and risks. And I think it's learning how to use these powerful but simple tools: goals, measurement, analysis, data-rich decision-making discussions, measured trials, and sort of to find breakthrough ways to do something even better, and communication, aggressive two-way communication that uses these tools to not only inform the community about what the choices were about priorities and the methods being used, but also to enlist and engage the community. That's where I think we are. Every community's in a different stage of sophistication, but I think that we have made huge progress. It's exciting to see things. Bloomberg's putting in funding for 100 cities to build the analytical capability. It means we need to build new skills, new ways of doing business, and figure out how to help those who are already in government evolve and learn how to manage focused on these 4 obsessions. So thank you very much.